Agenda item 9, discussion on the Guthrie Public Schools long-range plan.
Okay, after the board retreat, I was given the charge of developing, reconvening the long-range planning committee with a target mill levy of 17 mills for future consideration of bond issues and capital projects. This last month, the Long Range Planning Committee made a presentation to the board about their priorities. And so tonight we've got John Wolf from Municipal Finance and Sean Willis from the Stacy Group with us tonight. In front of you, you have the two most important pieces of paper are the 17 mil levy assumption, which is right here, and this is how the financing could be. We could do something different, but this is how it could be for whatever the scope of cost we have for the capital projects that you select. And you can see the terms and when those bonds would be sold. Then pairing the funds with the needs that are listed. This spreadsheet that you have with that. The Stacy Group has given us budget figures for the projects that were discussed by the Long Range Planning Committee. And we had two board members that served on there, Janae and Jennifer, on that committee. And I asked Sean to please price this out with the understanding that we would consider CM at risk for a construction delivery method. Not mandatory, but I wanted to make sure that we had the figures based on that as a possibility. The other item that is important with this is when the money is available, you have to figure in on those projects inflation, and you have to be able to forecast inflation. And as you can see by looking at the 17 mil levy assumption, it is 2023 before we can get even close to what it would cost for an elementary school. And that's without doing any projects prior to. And so we're fighting a little bit of the inflation of that based on when that money becomes available. And remember that our total net assessed valuation, we can go into debt up to 10% of what that is. And so if that net assessed valuation were to jump dramatically for whatever reason, then all of these assumptions are really kind of out the window. But John, when John puts this stuff, these numbers together, he plans on reasonable property appreciation, and I think we've actually been a little ahead of that over the last few years as we paid off our previous bond. And so there's a lot of moving parts to this, but understanding when the money could become available and when we could sell those bonds is an important part as far as how we would phase this in. The other piece to this is if we were to delay this election, we run the risk, as we talked about in the board retreat, of our millage lowering, and then we have a spike to get it back up. And remember when a few of you were on the board when we passed the bond issue in 2015, the millage had gone to 0. And when it went to 0, that ended up being on an average an 18% tax increase for our property owners inside Guthrie School District. Right now, our millage is at, what is it, Michelle? 13?
14.12.
Okay. And so it's a little below the target that we set of 15. And that's as much as anything because the property appreciation has been higher than what we projected. And so that's kind of where we are with this. The financing of it, if you have questions about that, John can certainly answer those questions, and then the potential projects. That's ultimately the board's decision on prioritizing those. What we have here are prices from the things that were talked about by the Long Range Planning Committee. And so, Mr. President, I'm not sure how you want the next part of the conversation to go, but there's a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things here. One is, I guess, the projects listed, we'll be discussing those, and then discussing what the Long Range Planning Committee had recommended as far as prioritizing these. I know you said it's 2023 before we would have money available. So are you thinking waiting? I'm sure you're not talking about, you're probably going to spend some of this money in early years on some of these smaller projects, and then what year could the elementary then be built? 24 or 25?
Probably, Sean, help me out here. I think we could go to, and it all depends on how we front load this, but with the sale of 7.7 million in October of 2022, I'm sure that we could go out for bid sometime in that year, or at least in early 23.
How much?
By selling 7.7 million, then we would have enough on hand to get started.
Depends on if we'd have to phase it.
Yeah.
The project, we'd have to do it 2 phases, because I think what year was that,
2020, late 2023, I'm sorry,
10/1/22?
2022.
And then
But
22.
probably would have to be 2023 before we could do that.
Yeah,
because that would give us-
2023, we kind of were projecting more like a 12.7,
And
and then it jumps up to 13.2 in 2024.
And for the board's benefit, Sean and I had discussions even late today about what this would look like if, based on the inflation, if we did nothing other than stockpile the cash until we could begin construction as soon as possible, which would be potentially 2022. But the problem with that is we're not doing anything else. We're doing no other projects until then. Now, there's a couple of wrinkles to this. I'm projecting that we're going to have money remaining in the current bond projects, where we could take some of the things off of this list and they could be done with the bond funds that were passed in 2015. The way the bond language was, some of the things that we could do, heat and air at Fogarty that's on this list. We could do some of the work at the junior high. We wouldn't have enough to do all of it, but we could do some of the heat and air work at the junior high. We could look at district technology.
That's what we need to look at.
We could look at, there's a lot of different things that we could do with those remaining funds to start on this list also.
Do you have an estimate of what you think those funds are going to look
Well,
like? I mean, what was-
I do, but here's the thing that I'm very cautious about. The one big ticket item we have remaining that we don't have a bid figure on, we will open that on January 10th, is it
9th.
9th, okay, is the heat and air at the high school. And so, and that project will have some alternates in there as well. And Sean and I were talking about that this afternoon as well. We have done very well on these projects. They've been under budget, and we have benefited from that. But until we're done with all of them and know better, I'm just very cautious, because those are the things we have to do, and those are the things that we told the voters that we would do in 2015. I expect that we will have, I think it's a safe statement that we will have over 500,000 after we do the heat and air at the high school. The other variable that's still out there, and that variable is diminishing by the day, but is the work at the junior high. And we've had a change order there, but we're still under budget for that project. And so when I come up with those figures, that's everything that we currently have under contract compared to the budget figures and the bond funds. And I'm not including the interest earned on that money while we've had it. So trying to be very conservative with this, but also make sure that we can complete the projects that we told the voters we would.
At the junior high, is it just the windows on the front side, and we're hoping to do the windows on around the building and possibly?
That would be in phase 2. That's on here on the junior high. But the issue, the variable has been some of the brick and the attachment to the building and holding it on. And that's a change order that we've already approved.
Yes. But phase 1 at the junior high was not every window, it was just the front?
No,
Okay.
just the front.
And that was, what was part of our discussion was, in long-range planning was, of course, it was my discussion, who brought it up, complete the package, finish a project completely. I mean,
I have a quick question on, because I just kind of halfway heard the CMAR. Did you put CMR on everything or only on the new school?
I just kind of figured it in that we didn't really talk about that, but I just assumed if we had a CM, that it would be for the entire package. That way you have the continuity of oversight. That's one of the, I think, good benefits of having a CM, is having the same people throughout the process. Now I know this is a longer time frame, and maybe that's not what you were looking for, but my thought was that you'd have one company do an oversight. That way, in whatever order you wanted to package these, if you wanted to package, one from each school, whether it's all the vestibules together or maybe just the HVAC together at different schools, then you would have them on hand already to package those as needed in different bid packages. That was my thought.
Generally, the benefits of having CMAR is that more complexity, they're able to work through the complexity of the projects. And Sean can provide insight on this. As far as a single trade, plumbing, maybe a vestibule, that type of thing, you're not going to reap the benefits of a CMAR. Whenever you've got a multi-million-dollar school, that's where they're going to be able to identify savings, and alternate design or whatever. So I would not recommend that.
Yeah, however you want to
on
handle it, I'm okay with. I mean, whatever
Because I think with the
organization.
windows that were at Central and everything's been done at the junior high, I mean, I think that's come along great. But whenever you're talking a $13 million project, I think that's when your CMR is going to be beneficial to identify value engineering and make different recommendations.
And certainly to add to that, if, depending on how the funding works out, you're right, we would have, you'd be money ahead if you could bundle the HVAC work at all the schools in one, and you could have one HVAC contractor do that work, and that, you definitely would save money than to try to bid those separately. Some of those mobilization costs and those kinds of things would be paid for once instead of multiple times. I don't know how that quite works
Well,
funding-wise, but that would help.
Even we even did that with the roofs
Right.
when we did GC. I mean, we bid those as a package because they were a common trade.
Right. and the more they have together, they're more likely to sharpen the pencil a little bit when they know they got a bigger project than a small chunk here or there that might not fit into their schedules.
So the mechanical items on this list, are they things that can wait towards the end of this project, or is?
Just roll the dice.
Well, I mean,
I think Cody needs to talk.
so if I ask you to,
on that,
I mean, if I
like
had
he
to ask
did.
you to prioritize these, is the mechanical first?
Bring to Cody.
Travis, we have 90-plus units that are older than 10 years, okay? And some are 20 years old, okay? And they're all still taking R22, which is no longer we use anymore. So that's part of the issue. Two of the chillers, the one at the junior high is 20-plus. It has one compressor. If we lose that compressor, the junior high has no AC. And one of the things about doing with the new windows is it's containing now. The people have talked about that no longer is wind blowing through and things like that, so it's more energy efficient. So where they can still raise the windows, but we lose that compressor, we're down a chiller. And so it's 20 years plus, and that's part of that issue with that. So the HVAC has been about halfway done as far as changing things out, but we still have a ways to go. That's why it's kind of in there on the top part of it.
And I think with the savings that we've had on our current projects, I think we're in a position where we can take some of that mechanical away from this list and still do some technology in the 2015 bond fund before we even go here. But the thing that is critical is getting those bid numbers for the HVAC at the high school.
The one other comment or question I have is technology at $3.5 million. Can you provide a technology plan or what that looks like for the district, and give us kind of a roadmap or where you plan to go with that?
I can. The cost for teacher computers alone, that's one teacher for, one computer every teacher is about $300,000. If we were to start the replacement project of smart panels over the projectors and the screens and the smart boards, that alone's about $750,000. We start trying to get every room up to the standards that we have at Charter Oak. So we put a sound system in there, like we did there, and there's another $300,000. If you look at one-to-one project for students, every student can have a computer whether they take them home or not. We're looking at about $1.2 million to do that project.
Before you've beefed up your infrastructure to support it.
Yeah, ain't got there yet.
You're talking
Yeah.
all grades though, I mean.
I'm talking
all
across
of
the board. Every
not
student we
front
have
setback or something.
could have a device in their hand.
How common is, how
Growing
common is that?
fast.
It's growing really fast.
Seems like I read articles about that. I mean, that just hadn't been working out as well as districts have planned, or ends up not being utilized.
It's, the districts that are failing at it are the districts that failed to plan and don't have, well, the next piece, the unknown piece to this is we're gonna have to upgrade some infrastructure as far as switches, because we're gonna have to upgrade our bandwidth to support that many devices. So we could be talking at least 500,000 just in switches. And then you start looking at putting more access points in to contain those devices. We tried to think forward when we did that and put an access point in every classroom. Will that support the bandwidth that we need, or are we gonna have to change those out?
Are you working those wirelessly?
Yes. Yeah.
What-
When I say access point, it's a wireless access point.
And having been in a district that implemented one-to-one, I can assure you that if you Dee's right, you have to have the infrastructure. You also have to have the professional development with the staff. Lacking that, it is a sure ticket for failure. And and then you have to have recurring professional development to assure fidelity to the process. And that's, but the other part, and Dee, you're probably going here, but the other part of one-to-one that is daunting is sustaining it with the devices, because there is a finite life to these devices, as we
So
all
that's my
know.
question, what's the cost to maintain the program once you have it?
That's my estimate, with about $1 million for just initial devices. And then you're probably gonna have to replace those at least every 4 years. So it's an ongoing cost. And maybe you can stretch them a little longer than that, but if you look at a Chromebook, the device license is about 3 years.
So about at least $500,000 a year just to maintain.
Just to maintain it.
one-to-one.
And no salvage value left in them when we get old ones, and this is.
Not any for Chromebooks that I'm gonna see. There may be a small one that, as we get more and more of them, that's kind of what's happened with iPads, is that there's a little bit of residual value in them, less than $100, but still, that's pretty good. And the devices that we would look at would be determined by the education, not the device. That's what I was going for a while ago. Throwing technology at something doesn't solve it, but it is a tool to help you get to where you want to go. So that's where we need to look of what tool do our students need to be able to advance their education. So
What about the kids who they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have internet at home?
that there are some programs out there where they can actually send devices home with them for as little as like $10 a month. Some schools do that, pay for it. It's part of their technology plan. You can always use the public library, a McDonald's, wherever you have public Wi-Fi. But from my point of view, it may not be as important as what they do at home as it is what the teacher can do with them in the classroom. And we've got some really good teachers. I just helped one that a parent gave her $500, and we were able to get 5 refurbished Chromebooks that she can have in her classroom for her students. And there's just more and more tools that are coming out with those devices that help students learn and help them learn faster.
What about staffing for your department? Because obviously you're currently not going to be able to handle,
Right.
if we handed out 3,500 Chromebooks.
Right. That,
Trevor stood up on that.
yeah.
I mean,
That's-
what does that look like? I mean, because obviously staffing's going to have to be beefed up as well.
Yeah, we would have to, a minimum of 2, if not closer to 4 people to be able to handle that volume. Because the other thing with that, in my mind, is to keep it in their hands. So you always would want to have spare devices to check out with them. You bring me your broken one, we fix it, get it back to you, so you're not without a device or a tool to use in the classroom.
When we implemented this previous district, we made one dedicated technology technician for each building that had it. And at the high school, I believe we had 2. So, and that's a serious commitment, no doubt.
Yeah.
In the figures that you gave, is there any inclusion for, like she said, for the staffing? I mean, any
No.
money? Okay, so that's
No.
extra.
And that's why, Dee's here to talk about the technology, but that's that's obviously a need that this district has failed to address, and it's and to to Dee's credit, but I think sometimes to our own detriment, Dee has been very good at figuring out ways to make it work. And I think sometimes I think he's been a little too good at that for our own good.
The one-to-one all the way down to the elementary level seems a little excessive. I want to support the technology portion of this,
Right.
but personally, I want to do some research on, do we really need a one-to-one for 3,500 students?
Right, and one thing I'll tell you is you'll find the lower grades generally will choose some touch device because those kids don't have any way to know to use a mouse because they've never seen one. Yeah, so that's just foreign to
But
them.
I can see having the computers,
Right.
having a greater number of those at the school. but
And
to
and
send-
most
send them home
most
with
of the
device.
ones that do one-to-one down to a kindergarten level have an iPad cart in the classroom, and it's, like I said, simply a tool in the classroom. They can all go do their reading practice at the same time,
But it stays in the classroom.
but it stays in the classroom. Most younger kids, they do not send home with.
Okay.
I know there are probably some out there, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, the ones that get sent home generally are at 6th grade or higher, and there's also you do an insurance policy, and I think in Honk, I think we were getting the laptops were a $20 a year policy, I believe, for insurance. I don't know what they're running now, but.
I'm not sure what they would be for these devices, but it wouldn't be a significant cost. And in a lot of cases, if a kid wants to take it home, then the parent can pay for that. And otherwise, the device stays at school. So there are still a lot of things to finalize how that happens, but like Dr. Simpson said, the first step is to get the teachers comfortable with the technology, and to, in our case, just to have the technology. So
What would that take? I mean, is that
that's going to be the $300,000 to start with.
the training, the
The
teachers?
the laptops, whatever device we give the teachers.
That's a new computer for the teachers,
Yeah.
because right now, a lot of our teachers are still running on refurbished computers that we've gotten from other
But then you
districts.
need to train those teachers.
Then we need to spend some time training those teachers. And
Is that something we send them to training, or is something you put on for them?
no, generally it's something you do internally. One of the things that companies like Apple do is they will send people in, and gosh, it was 10 years ago when we got the grant and brought in Apple Professional Development, and we took all the teachers in the freshman wing and spent a full day going through how to use those iPads, how to get apps on them, how to engage students with them, what they could do. And then it's something you just continue on. You've got some teachers that'll be really fast learners and do really cool things, and they can be your next presenter. So,
And we have some that are capable of that now.
yeah.
Okay, Dee, so every teacher has a laptop. What are they going to do with it? What are they going to do to help the kids with it? I mean, not just,
Just as an
Reporting
example
to-
right now, you're talking about a teacher with a 10-year-old computer that they try and go to the internet to run something. It takes it 2 to 3 minutes to load a video just because that computer doesn't have a video card that's capable of running something that's that big. We used an example the other day. I bought Greg a new video card for his computer at school. He did a board meeting that takes him 4 hours in about 40 minutes. So it's just the type of computer you have and the speed at which you can do it, and the drawing the frustration level down for you walk in and it doesn't work today. That's what a new device will do for our teachers. Then they're also capable of taking them home. That's why I think laptops are the way to go. A lot of teachers don't have one at home, but they can go home, work on their lessons, still communicate with students. That's how I think it'll help our students.
So would this replace their desktops, or would it be a mobile data unit?
That's what I would recommend.
Okay. So what about security, network security, and you know.
Security wise,
Yeah,
we're-
student records, you know, that sort of thing.
yeah, we run Sophos XG firewalls, and so we can see penetration attempts,
But
those
I
kind
didn't know
of
if there would
things.
be additional security.
There really shouldn't be, no, because there shouldn't be anything that's not in the cloud already.
Yeah.
So like student grade book and those kind of things, they're already secured in the cloud. So
Sorry, okay.
they're not, it's not on a laptop.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's another training issue of, you don't store those things on your laptop, you store them in your Google folder, so if the laptop walks off, they don't have any access to it.
Or if for some reason it gets targeted by a virus,
Mhm.
that you lose everything, right, Dee?
Yep.
That would be my desktop a year ago or 2 years ago.
So you're saying there's a level of encryption on the laptops, or would be?
They're not necessarily encryption as like our student information. All of that is hosted in a secure
web-based.
facility. It's web-based.
And in a perfect world, yeah, I get it, because
Yeah.
I do IT
Yeah.
every
but
day, and in a
there's-
perfect world,
There's no
but it's so
100%.
simple for them to click, 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 and, oh, it's on their desktop.
Mhm.
And we've just downloaded a bunch of student information.
Yeah,
And then
it's
they put that laptop in their
What teachers
trunk.
actually have access to is very minimal as far as any private data. The
Their
gradebook
gradebook is
gradebook
about
portion
it.
doesn't
Yeah.
take everything that we have in there. So we work on we restrict it as hard as we can, and then we give you what you need, instead of just letting everybody have everything. So as far as teachers go, that's at a minimum of what kind of data they have. They have names, parent names, the students' grades, they have some contact information, and that's about it.
So that 2.2 million, that's one-to-one all the way down to kindergarten, pre-K.
And I pulled round numbers together so we can look at, this is what it would cost to do this project. So you could go back and say, we just want to do high school kids, and we could phase it in over X number of years. But I think we need to look at what we want to do with that. And I think, our students need new devices.
I mean, is it reasonable to say if, we do one-to-one down to the junior high level and then fund technology at the lower elementary levels, iPad cards or Chromebooks?
That-
But it's something less expensive than a true one-to-one at that level, or?
Well,
When you say one-to-one,
I'm
that's a kid-
I'm still saying a device for every student. I'm not saying
all
it's
day
gonna-
long. You're saying a third grader needs an iPad or a computer in his hand from the time he gets to school to the time he goes home? Or can that technology be shared?
You could possibly share that. Sure. Because there's going to be, what we see is there's a teacher that pretty much has that iPad cart in her classroom all the time, because she's taking ways to reach those students. Maybe it's their reading, maybe it's their math. I walk in an elementary classroom and I'll see a projector paused and the teacher teaching, and then the next thing I know, she's hit that and they're off on something else, rhymes and math problems and everything else. So like everything else, there's teachers that are really going to use it and there's some that may not yet. So
I mean, is there data out there that's showing schools that have one-to-one devices, each kid have a device, that they're testing higher, or they're,
I'm sure you can find the data both ways. I know there are some that will claim and have data that show, our test scores went from here to here. And then you'll have others that come in and say, well, we might have improved a few points. I don't think you're going to find very many that say it was a total flop because of the technology. It may have been a total flop because of the implementation.
Central? The soft, does it say soft costs?
No, that's district-wide. That's all the capital projects.
On Central, the soft cost for capital projects?
No, that's all of the capital projects other than Cotterell, all of the other sites.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Okay, Cody, I'm gonna put you on the spot. So Cotterell is the school that we're looking, obviously, that has been proposed to be replaced next. So we've got a few years before we're gonna be able to replace that. I mean, I know we've got some pretty big needs at that school just to keep it running on a day-to-day basis. I mean, what are we looking at? Because none of these, this isn't factoring any money being put into that school.
We continue to take care of the issues that we're aware of on a day-to-day basis up until we do this. The roof is the biggest thing going on. We all know that roof is in bad shape. But we continue to patch that roof, because if we try to fix that roof in the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to cost you $700,000. We talked about that at the meeting. So we just continue to patch that. Everything else, a lot of the units have been replaced on that one. We probably have about, I don't know, 15 to 18 more to go to replace. If we need to do that, we do that. If we can replace a motor or a compressor or whatever, we're doing that. So we're keeping it going, and everything is running at it's single pane windows. It's just the way it is until we replace it. Some window breaks, we put it back in a single pane window. So we repair things. We fixed the siding of one of the quad buildings a year ago. So when things like that happen, door breaks, whatever, we just continue to replace it. We replaced 2 doors, entry doors, this past year on there. So it can be maintained if we have to wait until 23 or 24 as of right now. The biggest issue to me is the roof, but we're still able to hold to that. The roof gets to a certain point, it becomes very cumbersome to keep repairing it, but we've been able to do that as we moved along. The plumbing is, I believe, can make it, and AC we're working on, like I talked about. Electrical's maxed out, but we're still doing what we're doing with electrical and things like that. So most of those needs, we can do it. Not simple, but it's not a high cost to it yet. But I can't promise you something won't happen.
No, we understand, and I totally appreciate that. But, I mean, it's just really knowing if there's any real glaring issues that you can foresee I mean, obviously the roof, but, I mean, because if we have to spend a whole bunch of money on that
The
building.
thing about it now is because we've hired, like, the biggest ticket item when you're dealing with electrical, plumbing, and HVAC, mechanical is mechanical.
Yeah.
And thankfully that we've hired a contractor, and instead of spending anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 to put in a new unit, we can spend $3,000 to $5,000 buying the unit itself. We buy the units, we put the units in. We're capable of doing that now. So that saved us a lot of money, and that's a big ticket item besides the roof on the building, really, especially that building. The building is ADA odd. I'll just put it that way. You gotta go up and down, and you got the gym on the 3rd floor, or whatever you want to call it, and things like that. So it's just a tight fit. I like to open up the cafeteria more, because I think some of that ductwork and all that ceiling tile and everything can be removed, or at least have some space in it. But that's just cosmetic stuff. That's stuff that we can take care of in time, if it continues as it is. The bones are okay, it's just an odd-shaped building.
I do want to make mention of something that is not on this list, but has been brought to me to bring to you, and that is a request for instruments from the band. And the list that I have totals a little over $212,000 also.
Was there any discussion about the track?
We haven't had any discussion about the track.
I mean, I guess
it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little bit of an interest in that, I guess. But I mean, I know 5 years ago we said if we don't fix it, we're going to completely lose it.
Mhm.
I mean, are we there yet?
There's cracks.
They're still there. I mean,
Getting better.
it's, and that's, you know, that kind of goes back to pairing our needs, our wants, and our means to get there. Because one of the things that, when we talked with the Long Range Planning Committee, we talked about going through 2024 at 18.9 million. Before you take the technology, put the technology on there, we're at 18.3 million with just those capital projects that we have on that list. And that's with no technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think the secure vegetables are important. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I want to ask, I mean, I think the technology portion needs to be pared back. I think one-to-one needs to be re-examined. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I'm open to it. I want to research the subject a little bit, but I mean, I know instruction is changing, the delivery of instruction is changing, kids learn differently, I understand that. But I think to have a true one-to-one all the way down through all the grades.
Well, I mean, obviously, in a perfect world where money wasn't a problem, that would be great. And we didn't have so many greater needs in other areas as well. But I kind of tend to agree with Travis. I mean, I definitely think that there needs to be some things addressed.
One of the things, typically with a one-to-one implementation, you don't just walk in one year and say we're going K through 12 one-to-one. You phase it in. You do that for several reasons. One, your professional development with your staff, if you were to try and do it district-wide at once, would be arduous at best. Secondly, you don't get into the same situation that this district got into with their transportation of having everything the same age. You know, in 2002, when they had a bondage or they had a lease on all those buses, they were all nice and new, but they all got old at the same time. And that's something that to consider. If you want to sustain this and it to be successful, there has to be a plan after implementation for sustainability. And I can tell you that and I think I've shared this with the board before, we had dedicated $1 million per year toward technology in Ponca City, and as I left and we were beginning to ramp up the implementation of the one-to-one and going into our second class, we started up with the 8th grade class and we just went through each year and added one. We were going to 1.5 million per year in order to sustain that. But the other part of this that I don't want to be lost, and everybody focusing on that one-to-one, there's a sustainability issue just with the technology that we have in the classroom now that is having the goal of having every computer you own under warranty within 4 years or 5 years takes a huge burden off of the technology department, and that is that's a big hurdle that we have right now, because do you know how many computers we have under warranty? What percent?
I'd say probably less than 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably way less.
Well, not just in technology, we're talking about just computers and laptops, but right now in the classrooms, where are we district-wide to be able to have the visibility of technology so that everybody's being able to see a screen? Are we pretty complete on that? Or is there smart boards? There's more technology than just this laptop.
Right, there's projectors in every room, there's screens in every room, there's smart boards in the majority of them. All smart boards that are usually there are used. I happen to have a contact that knows that we're trying to find any way we can to get that into the classrooms. And so he's helped me out with those. Part of them we got from Rogers, Arkansas, that they did a complete swap out of all their smart boards in their classrooms, so we bought them for $100 a piece. That's how they got there. But all of those things we've tried to take care of. Projectors, that's just an ongoing expense we have every year that we're going to have a certain percentage die. And I've picked up some from other schools that they've used their bond funds and replaced their projectors. So the projectors were still running when they came out, they just give them to me. I've been replacing them with those. So when I talk about smart panels, that would replace some of those things. And they're projected to be 10 years. So that's a pretty good lifespan for a piece of technology that's going to cost less than $3,000.
And maintenance on that classroom is going to go down to zero on those machines. Where currently it's...
What I've tried to do is to project everything in the district to match what we did at Charter Oak. So that was my goal.
And when we did Charter Oak, you relocated the servers there, is that correct?
We are going to co-locate a couple of servers. We haven't moved them yet, but we're going to take one of our Active Directory servers down there, and then we're going to try and, that's another part that I haven't even mentioned, but trying to put a backup down there so we're geographically apart. And like I said, the majority of anything we have that's important is in the cloud. So it's not as big of an issue anymore, but there's still some files and things that need to be backed up locally.
It just seems like the maintenance on all this technology would just have to come from bond money. Bonds being, bond issues being passed every 7-8 years to make sure that we keep the project rolling like it needs to roll.
And that's exactly how every district I know does it.
But that's where I'm kind of question a little bit the one-on-one, see if there's, look at reducing that $2.2 million significantly. I mean,
one of the things, and this, something to kind of focus on here, and this is kind of bringing John into the discussion. Okay, how far out are we going to go? If we look at 2024, we've got 18.9 million. If we go through 2025, we've got 22.6 million. And if we go to 2025 and thinking about the next steps after that, because remember that if all this were to come through and all this happens that's on this list in 2025, 2026, theoretically, we would be opening a new school. And barring tremendous student growth, we would still have one elementary school that was in bad shape by then, even though we're going to do a few things to it. We're talking about Fogarty. And we'd have an elementary school that is undersized and completely landlocked in Central. And that's in 2025. And John, when could we pass another bond issue after that? If we went out to the 22 million in 2025 and sold that. sold that. It would be 2032 before we could get,
And that funds for Fogarty?
barring a huge influx of NAV.
Yeah, 2030 before you're, because you have to wait for your big bonds to fall off. We have a 9-year bond right now. You have to go out so many years on that. And so we're looking at the next big capacity increase 2030. So you're looking at, other than that, you're looking at 1 to 3 million here and there. And that's not going to let you put Fogarty together in pieces like that. So you essentially have to wait to 30.
Or a Fogarty Central combination, let's say. And I know we're talking a long ways down the road, but we need to think about that because we're really thinking about how long our mortgage is going to be on the next one too, because you've got to set the parameters of what you're looking at here.
Your next block after this block, whether you do 25 or 26, and then you look at the next 7 or 8 years, that's where your bonds falling off, as you look at different terms for different bonds, that's where you're going to have significant funding. You'll have approximately $40 million that you can address now. $40 million 10 years from now won't buy as much as it buys today or in the next 3 or 4 years, but that's always been kind of the block. You address your second elementary in this next block of 6 or 7 years, and the next 6 or 7 years you have as much as $40 million for, now this is covering all projects for that 7-year period, but you have probably $22 million that you could, in 2030 and 31, that you could apply towards part or at least one of those elementary schools, if not part of starting another one. So, but we're talking 31, we're talking 13 years from now before you get to that period, that next point of addressing another elementary school.
And that's, so this list of things has to get by with that in the building fund until.
So after this work with the junior high, I mean, how much is left for a complete renovation, cost-wise?
Before a complete renovation?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
how much more is needed to finish it out?
Well, yeah, a complete renovation,
I mean, at this point, we would have done all the mechanical, or most of the mechanical, all the exterior. So how much is left to finish out the inside?
Gosh, I don't remember the.
Still like $8 million.
Yeah, it was 8 million, wasn't it? Or when it's 8 or 9?
I don't.
Yeah, it's 8 or 9 million, I think. So we're still not even close.
Yeah, because this is 2.8 for the junior high, and we've spent not quite 6, I guess, in this round. So it gets you 3.5. Yeah, you're 6 or 7 million away.
So in the phase 2 envelope, is that windows and tuck point? And I mean, have we addressed all the water infiltration?
We did all the water infiltration in the back of the building, on the alley, and along the front of the building. And so the next phase would be the rest of the windows, the rest of the tuck pointing.
So if you said this first phase was 600,000?
yeah.
5, yeah, basically.
So what is that $1 million covering?
Well, just phase 1 on the front, the windows were $300,000. So there's, we have all the windows in the back. We didn't do the inside alcove on between the annex and the main building, or east or west side. So we kind of have 2/3 left, or 3/4 of the building left. The masonry on phase 1 was, well, if you take just phase 1, the windows, the blinds, the masonry, they had some carpentry work. Their bonds and insurance and general conditions was $482,000. So basically trying to double that to do the rest of the building.
And that's
That
just-
takes out the waterproofing we've already done.
And that's just the junior high building itself. Does any of that include the gymnasium?
No, not the gym,
Okay.
just the junior high building and the addition that was
Okay.
done to it. So it's basically doubling phase one cost for just the exterior portion, not including the waterproofing that was done in sidewalks. On the back of the building, there'd be some extra masonry cost even on the back. There's some windows that have been, had enough water damage that the brick is just disintegrated. There's no bricks left around the windows. It's spalled off. So there'll be a little more brickwork that we even had to do in the front. The front was in pretty good condition. As far as anything falling off.
Especially for northern exposure. I was hoping that with that southern exposure, it wouldn't be as bad, but with the freeze thaw. That'll all work out.
Okay, good. We're all good, right?
Okay, Cody, which chillers and HVACs is the biggest problem in the school? Not all of them, but which one's the biggest? Biggest problems.
The junior high chiller and the units at Fogarty we need to replace. We're talking about going lower, like Dr. Simpson talked about. We're going 12, 13 years down the road with those HVAC units at Fogarty. About 20, 25 of those. And then I always worry about one chiller having one compressor, because if it goes, it goes. So I think, and it's 20 plus years old, like I said earlier, so that's the big ticket items for that. The pneumatic system at Guess is basically plastic tubing and everything going into the units that we can take all out, put in traditional thermostats and things like that. All that tubing, everything that's above the ceiling and everything else is dry rotted. It's just in pieces, and we're having to go by. We got to go up there and listen for air movement to find out where the air is leaking from, and go and replace that tubing and things like that. And it's just it's antiquated. You still can use pneumatic systems, but very few people do it, I think, anymore. You agree with that, Jennifer? It's just not. You got pneumatic systems anywhere in OSU or anything?
Some, not
Some.
many.
No.
I think the ones that we have are on the Reno or demo
Yeah.
list.
So I've got one question about the new Cotterell. I know we've got to build 2 levels, or 2-story. Was there much discussion about the cost of that versus, a single story at another location? I mean, it's still,
No, we didn't discuss that versus another location. I think part of that, I think the initial discussion was the cost of the land.
there's no way to build a single level building.
Not on
in
that side, it's too
Okay.
tight. And not to have a playground and enough parking.
One of the things that I was thinking about while Cody was talking about with regard to Fogarty and Central long-term plans, if we structurally are the facilities in good condition, structurally.
Fogarty and which one?
Central.
Central, I think, for sure.
Central
Fogarty
is for
really-
sure. I think there's some issues at Fogarty that, and Cody and I, in fact, we were talking about it yesterday, was there's some issues, but I think Central's solid.
Yeah.
And what's the capacity at Central?
About 300,
Fogarty.
about 500. Five
And
or 600.
Cotterell, once we replace it, it's gonna be 500.
Around 500, yeah.
What structural issues do you foresee at Fogarty?
I don't know of any major in the next 7 years that it's not gonna fall down.
We're at
Fogarty?
structure-wise, it's okay.
Well, my thought in asking the questions is if we push towards replacing Cotterell and we position ourselves where we can disperse Fogarty students and do a gut and reno on Fogarty. Now with that, I don't know what ADA implications that will be, or if we'll have to put an elevator in, or what other modifications would be for accessibility. But that's gonna be a lot less than, I mean, if we gut it and just go back bare bones and build it back, it's gonna be a lot less than $13 million. If the facility itself is structurally sound, and we are acceptable with the property that we have, as far as playground accessibility, do we need to look at, you know, drop off, pick up in that area, because I know it's a nightmare.
And we've not had the discussion about renovation of Fogarty, but I'm not saying that Sean's bunch couldn't come up with a plan, but with that proximity to a state highway and the traffic right there, I think it'd be very challenging to find a solution that would also serve more students than what it does now. And the thing to consider long-term is with Fogarty and Central, would it be better served for Central to not serve students other than maybe, let's say, the alternative school and move admin there, and take the students that attend Central and students that attend Fogarty and build something away from the center of town? Because the other part of this is with the growth of residential area east of town, and the potential for growth there, that has me a little bit on edge as far as where we will be growing next. Just a thought. The challenge at Central is there's nowhere to go, and it is landlocked. Fogarty, to a certain degree, is landlocked as well because of the proximity to Highway 77 and trying to facilitate drop-off, pickup, and have it safe.
So you're saying in 8 years, we may be discussing relocating Fogarty?
Well, if we're going to...
I mean, so I'm wondering why we're going to spend close to $1 million on it.
But it probably wouldn't be in 8 years that we could actually do it, too. It would probably be 12 to 15 years before we could actually move into it. And that was a discussion that we had in the Long Range Planning Committee as well. Janae, you and Jennifer, that's what we talked about on addressing some of the restroom issues and things like that, because they are in really bad shape. And we said all along when we started this last bond project that we would have to put some money into Fogarty. That's why we put the roof on it, because we knew that.
But if we're going to spend the money there, we might as well do it right away, so we get our money's worth instead of waiting 6 or 7 years to do it. Looking out through 25 and 26.
So what are you?
Well, I'm saying, I assume you're saying that we would address the mechanical issues, the bathroom, all that here.
Well,
some of the first projects.
Well, Fogarty, about a third or half of the heat and air units have been replaced.
Yeah.
We replace them when they go out. And we're talking replace the remainder of them that are 15 or 20 years old. They were 1996.
Here's one unit that's 30 years old.
Yeah. And the bathrooms, and as far as the auditorium seating and the lighting, I'll tell you from last night, or night before last, the auditorium seating in there, we can't buy parts for it. Currently we have caution tape on the chairs that we don't want people to sit in. And I was in there night before last, and all of the elementaries, except for Charter Oak, used the Fogarty Auditorium for their Christmas program. And So, you know, that's,
Why do they
Okay.
not use the junior high? Will it not seat as many?
they don't need a space that big, but they needed a space where they could also go practice. And we had the kids go over there to practice. They don't need a space as big as the junior high, but they need a space bigger than the central cafeteria.
Because the seating is pretty good in the junior high, correct? I mean,
Yeah, on the lower level. It's the upper the balcony is just as bad as Fogarty.
It's like a death wish.
You mentioned Fogarty was an issue because it's on a state highway. Do you have a problem with Cotterell because it's on a busier state highway?
Well, the plan that Sean has for the site, it sets it back in the parking lot area and kind of removes it from the highway a little bit and gives us some space.
So we have space to get in and out.
Yeah, they've drawn up a site plan that routes cars and stuff.
Are we going to get to see that tonight?
So, in our discussion on the long-range planning committee, especially in the second meeting, okay, besides the fact that I say I think we need to finish out the junior high exterior, which I can see in that first part of that bond series there. The security, the vestibules at the schools was a big issue to get some security for people entering the schools. That was something that the long-range planning committee really addressed, and I'm looking at that possible $500,000 we have there. Either you could start that or you could go in and get the auditorium fixed at Fogarty if all the elementary kids are using that. And it is, because that auditorium needs to be fixed up and I know that looks like a priority on one school being Fogarty, but not if all of the schools that are located, elementaries within the city limits basically are going to be using it for stuff. It would be used by all of them. And that's just a thought. We've got an extra money out there that we might be playing with.
And the one thing, how we use that needs to be, unless we finished all the projects though, how we use that needs to be what was in the election language for the previous election. And that's why I chose the HVAC, because I checked the election language, and I also chose technology, because those were spelled out in the election. So
But we're over our 85%,
Yeah.
right? So we can
Yeah.
really spend the money how we want to. It's just it looks better to the public by saying this was in the bond issue.
yeah.
But you have to spend it according to the proposition they approve. Even once you meet the 85, you revert back to the proposition ballot language, so
Okay.
you can't steer from that. So that's a key issue.
Tell me about the band. The school has instruments and we check them out to students? Because I guess I just wasn't aware of that.
We do have some, and then we have some that have their own instruments. And the instruments that we have apparently are in very bad shape.
And they're needing how much money?
212?
212,000.
Did we not give them some money that we had left over on something not that long ago?
We spent about 50,000 on a box truck.
Yeah, we gave something for instruments sometime, not. Am I the only one that remembers that? Is it that too long ago?
Must have been, I don't remember
But
that.
uniforms.
Uniforms, right?
Okay, well,
Uniforms right
that's
before I
what
came.
uniforms,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But was, yeah.
Well, I do know that, and I love the band, so please don't take this wrong. Anyway, but we put that kind of thing on a bond issue one time, and it really hurt our bond issue because you were separating really out one organization over another is how people saw it. And that's something that if we can help internally, I think it's a smarter thing to do than put it on a bond issue.
And I actually just had mentioned to Sharon, but I was asking about the track. What potentially are we looking at to get that track where it's not so gaping? We have junior high kids, we have high school kids, we have all sports on that.
The fix that I had a price for 5 years ago, I believe, was $50,000 just to fix it, not to resurface it. It was just to fill in the cracks, and and keep it from getting worse.
Is it an asphalt track with a
No,
rubber
it's-
coating, or it's?
Yeah, it's a rubber coating, and I think it's asphalt underneath, and it's not, the curbing is not right, it's got other issues too, but,
It was close to a couple $100,000, wasn't it, to replace it?
Brand, you know, if you're fully replacing it down, starting over again, you're gonna be 700,000-800,000. We just did a third replacement of replaced the 7-lane track on top, and about a third of the asphalt below was broken, and it was 425,000. And that's a 7-lane, I don't know if you have an 8-lane.
or
Or
six,
six.
maybe six.
One more.
So is our goal tonight to prioritize the list that we have, or what?
The goal tonight, I was hoping for, is to give direction to Mr. Wolf where he could draft some language for a resolution that we could bring after Christmas, because the next part of this is the goal has been an April 2nd election. And John was the drop dead date for all that for the board to take action to have an April 2nd election.
January 31st, you have to file with the election board. So it's not a lot of time.
I mean, personally, I think they're all worthy projects, and I would just prefer you sort them out, prioritize them. No, I mean, you guys really know what the needs are, you're on the front lines of it. Now, I still would go back to, I want to do a little bit of research on technology, the 1-for-1, and what that looks like. I still think that should be cut back, but.
Well, I guess before we prioritize this, we need to, the first decision that has to be made is, are we going through 2024 at 18.9 million, or are we going through 2025 at 22.6 million? Because the other part of this is, and that's why I wanted you thinking down the road a little bit too, because as we mortgage ourselves out further, it pushes further away the next big ticket item. And so thinking along those lines, the other piece to this is, if we do through 2025 and we do the $22.665 million, then, and we pare down the technology, you know, I've heard about the track. We've talked about band instruments, and we've talked about some other things. Before we would actually have a resolution for this, we would have the bid number for the high school HVAC. So that helps us a lot.
What do we budget for that?
1.3 million.
Okay.
But let me issue this caveat. That was not air conditioning the 2 gyms, which I have added as an alternate to see if we have the money to do that.
And the heat, and we're heating that north gym, correct?
Well, we're heating it now, but to air condition it as well, because they are classroom spaces. So that variable, controlling for that variable, is important with the final decision. But getting to that final decision, we need to make a big step tonight. And if there are projects that the board would like to add to this list, then that's also a discussion. But again, the first discussion needs to be, what is the dollar figure based on the 17 mil levy assumption?
I would recommend shooting for the 2024-25, just because we're spending a lot. I don't want to spend that far.
Okay,
Personally.
so the 2024 at the 18.9 million. Okay.
Because
Yeah, and I think,
I think, you know, I had talked to Sean a little bit beforehand with regards to vestibule designs and looking at the costs that have been estimated, and I do appreciate, you know, putting that safety net in on these numbers, but I think we will realize some cost savings, bundling projects up, not using the CMAR on everything. So I think that we'll see that. So that's just my opinion.
Sounds good, and I don't want to tie up future boards that far out. Needs may change a little bit between now and then, and there'll be probably maybe an entirely new board, and then maybe a new mill levy set at that point in time. I mean, you just never know. So I agree with Jennifer on no more than 24 or 25. Years 24, 25. I don't know how.
I agree. I think
I
I think that's reasonable.
So now, at 18.9 million, are there, we've got 18.3 million, if I remember right, in the, this is where I remember this book.
He just said everything on here would be covered under the rest of this bond issue. Don't just look at any of those items we could do with remaining funds.
John just said that.
John just said that. I just had him look it up, yeah.
Well, and-
So anything on this potential project we could do?
With remaining funds,
With
yes,
remaining.
under this bond issue.
Well, outside of Cotterell, but everything underneath.
Oh, yeah, except, yeah. Well, that's great.
Thank you for that
Sean can't,
clarification.
Sean can't do that one. Yeah, at least we know.
Sean's getting nervous.
We are, that our funds that may be available to do something on it.
Well, John, can we word the next bond, the one we're looking at now? I mean, I know we need to identify projects, which we have. Is there wording that could be added that if these items are addressed and there are remaining funds, that those could be used towards something, say the track or
Bandage.
I will say that the proposition we did in 15, outside of athletic facilities, was very broad. It was making improvements to pretty much every school you had. And so that gave you the flexibility to do what Dr. Simpson had mentioned
So,
regarding the school facilities. Now athletic,
What
it
about
doesn't
track?
really,
Is that gonna be?
you would have to broaden that just a little bit more for athletic facilities on the next proposition and decide it politically if that's going to be palatable.
Because remember the challenges that we've had historically in this district.
Well, and I'm not saying, I just want the flexibility as we have now, that with the remaining funds from this initial bond, that we could address something that wasn't previously identified.
It's an enviable position to be in if you have the trust of the community and you've been good stewards and you've been frugal with this money, and we have been, and now we can address some additional needs that we knew were there when we passed the last bond issue. I mean, there's not anything on this other than well, I think we did talk some about the secure restriction, but there's not anything on this list that wasn't at some point there was some kind of discussion about when we put the last bond issue in front of the public, either by the board or by the long range planning committee.
Because most of the things that the Long Range Planning Committee brought back were just maybe updated versions of what they had already proposed.
Because really the need had not changed dramatically.
Right.
We were just about four to 5 years down the road of use, but nothing major had changed. Well, this list right here, minus the 3.5 million in technology, is 18.3. I guess the
And there's no school, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it's college still on
Oh,
there.
okay.
18.3 if you take all the technology off. But I do think that some of this, I think there are things that are on this list that can be taken care of with the additional funds that we have.
Well, the building fund has been managed quite well. And I mean, and as we address more mechanical issues, shouldn't that take pressure off of that as well?
Yeah, and that's something with, if you take away the maintenance costs of Cotterell by building a new Cotterell, that helps the building fund tremendously. That's why districts that pass these successive bond issues and keep their facilities up to date don't have as much pressure on them with the building fund. But we're not there yet.
Since I wasn't here the last go around and you passed the bond, I know you hired a advertising firm to kind of get the word out and get it out. We had a lot longer period of time to get the word out, to get the public, than we would now to April.
The committee hired.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Not
the foundation, the
Yes.
foundation hired, I apologize.
We did have more lead time, but not a lot. But what I've learned is that the lead time wasn't as necessary as the fundraising by the foundation to promote the bond issue. Because the school can't promote the bond issue, I can't promote the bond issue, but the people the committee that promoted it were very key with that. And one of the key players in that is no longer in our community. That's something to consider. Shayla Simpson. But they're raising, you remember that we had a dinner, the foundation put on a dinner where Mike Turpin spoke, and we raised a lot of money that night. I want to say we raised around $40,000 that evening, and $30,000 came from the Chickasaw Nation. So that, so there were some things that we had happen that helped us with that. You remember, we had a failed bond issue before that where we went very fast, and we raised some funds, but we did not have the professional assistance that the foundation didn't have the professional assistance that they did this last time. So.
Do you feel like we're going too fast for this, to try to get it
Well,
on the April ballot?
I am a little nervous about that. I'll be honest.
I am too. That's why
I
I'm
am a little nervous about it. I think we have compressed this whole process a lot more than we did the last time. But we ought to be better at it than we were last time, because
Well,
we've done it
you
too.
already had needs identified though, too.
Yeah, and I think the real challenging thing is mobilizing the people that work with the foundation to get the message out about what this bond issue will look like. And so, but the other side of this is, John, if we delay this,
Your taxes drop.
Yeah, that's.
Let's address that real quick. Your taxes would actually, it was 14.12 mil levy that went out this fall. If you don't do anything, it's going to drop to probably 12 3/4. Now, on the other side of this is you're asking to go from 15 as a target to 70. And so the usual thought process is, well, we can't really go out and say we're not increasing taxes, and then we have this belly where you don't close this by July 1, this next bond series, and it drops down. You're going to be addressing to your public, you're going to 17 mils, so you are going to have a tax increase. And so your decision has to be made is it going from a 14.12, which is what it was this last year, to a 17 mil. If it drops to 12.75 going to 17, you know, how hard is that to fight? Let's say you have the election, went to the voters, and you say, well, you know, we're focusing on 17 mills and we're going to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And then their tax bills come out in November of 2019, and it's 12.75, which is a part of all the other taxing entities. And not sure how many citizens, taxpayers actually go in and look at the allocation or the apportionment, but it did drop down a little bit. And so the common taxpayer is, wait a minute, I just proved an election. You know, I don't think my taxes went up, they went down. And that's a tough educating process, because they'll look at that and say, well, wait a minute, that's not really generally what I heard in the public. I heard we're going to 17. It's that following year in 20. And with all that being said, if you guys can't come to a meeting of the minds, and we're trying to make this April deadline to close the issue by July 1, from my end, it's not as critical, because you are raising your taxes. You're going to raise taxes on the property owners, because you're going from 15 to 17 mils. And so if it drops to 12.75, it's up to you guys individually to see, you know, is that a negative situation or not? Where it drops down, then it shoots up 4.5 mils in 2020.
The next election date would be May 14th, but you couldn't get that done by July 1st.
And it's going to be tight on April 2nd. It'll be tight. We'll get it done. You'll have to have like a special meeting for one of the bond meetings that we have. But it'll be very tight. We cannot certainly close the deal by June 30 if we do anything after that day.
I think it's better to take it, go forward now than to wait and then have that big jump, because that's, when we did that the last time, we had nothing, and then all of a sudden we asked them for this, bond issue, and
That's what I wanted to.
and people took it okay. Once we did our due diligence, went out and talked and did all our stuff, what, 76%?
77.
77. That's amazing. This increase is a little, wouldn't it be easier to take than the increase we had last time? They had a big bite last time, and this will be, you have to kind of, am I not right? You have to kind of keep it this way, so it doesn't do this every now and then, and, isn't that what Edmond does? They keep theirs so high, and...
Well, the intent is once you get to a level and you get to a target, you try to keep it at that target.
Right.
We have this discussion every day. We had a discussion with Tulsa schools today, public schools, the second largest district in the state, and they're looking at, well, what do we say? We said we were going to raise taxes, but then they had different, like a technology bond, $38 million election 4 or 5 years ago. They're having all the same discussion you're having. How do we accomplish what we need to, and then go to the voters, and if we say we're going to have a rate increase or some type of tax increase, yeah, you went from 0 to 15. It's a lot more palatable to go from 15 to 17.
Exactly.
And that's what you guys
That's what I think.
have done, is made that's a smaller jump, and I'd like to keep it at that 2 mils.
Right.
From my
Or let it go
perspective.
down to 12 and then have to try to go back up to 17. And
With a history of being good stewards of the money and providing what we said we would provide.
I think we have good trust now, I hope. I think we do.
So John, if we go out to 2024,
Okay.
then at that point, do I just say that the next election we can have is, when is the next election we can have to keep it at a 17 mil?
What you want to do, because we're talking about a potential October 24 issue that wraps up that authorization. I would schedule election that spring of 24, because we'll know a lot more as far as your growth and your net assessed valuation. We'll know where the interest rate market is. And so you plan to kind of wrap around that. And
So you'd have an election in spring of '24 as your last
as you're
bonds?
finishing up, right.
Because we've got smaller bonds that are falling off.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And that's what we talked about in 2015, is keeping it, we already looked forward
You
then
want the consistency.
to win the next one, because that's what you need to keep.
So
Well, if
that,
you look at
that,
whatever the par amount is in '24, your handouts are bigger fonts than what I'm looking at here. I'm over here with the magnifying glass.
5.5 million.
How much?
5.5.
Okay. If, there you go. Thank you, sir. Guthrie's a nuance in that you have potential, there's some, you've had 3 years, average 5.3% growth in your NAV. Couple businesses are the main reason for a majority of that growth. But if you continue to grow the corridor and so forth and so on in the community, then we're saying there's a little over $7 million. That potentially could grow to 9 million in capacity that 17 mills generates. And Travis even kind of addressed this at one of our meetings 4 or 5 months ago. We're going to be looking at this each and every year. And you could be in a situation where in '23 you call an election because you're way over. And I said, all right, guys, we need to get this on so that you don't have a drop-off situation, which we're trying to address now. So we, on every one of our school districts, we set to have the election usually 6 to 12 months prior to the last bond sale that we have in our projection. And we'll know 4 or 5 years from now, kind of what your NAV done, what the market has done, and we'll be able to reassess that. But I would say you have in '24, and you may have a couple million that you can do on top of the 7 out of a new election authorization for whatever purposes you guys determine for the next
we
project.
had about a authority issue up 30 years.
Puts us on a 5-year plan. 19.
But it does, but it doesn't, because you still can't exceed your 10% net assessed valuation. And so if that money, if we still have X amount in debt, because you look at if you look at the duration of the 7.7 and the 2.3, those are 10-year durations. And you got a 5.5 at 5 years. And so you've got to be mindful of that as you go through that. Because the next one could look somewhat like, well, it wouldn't look like what we have up above, but going down that line, John, if we did through 2024, and we do another election, then if you parcel all that out, you can't get a school built for 3.7 or 3.7 and 1.9 or 3.7, 1.9 and 1.8. You've got to piece a bunch of that together, kind of like what we're doing right now, and it's going to be backloaded on your big money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
But the thing is, that's the hard thing about predicting that far in the future, because one little change in a variable could drastically change that when you're talking about that amount of time between now and when you're talking about it.
And one thing we said last time, and we started on some of the, schools in town, but I think if we go forward with the good faith of finishing up, like you said, the projects we've started, that's gonna be big for everybody, because we built the school, it's great, and now they're saying, well, they said they were gonna address them and finish it out, and I think it just shows we mean what we say. And
We're going through '24. What does that short on this list here?
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. At 25, we've covered this. At 24, we haven't. So what are we taking out of here? We're not covering everything on here.
It's 18.3 if you take out the technology.
But we can't
Well,
take out
we can't-
technology.
I know,
Well,
no, I
like
know.
Jennifer
Yeah.
said, there may be some cost savings whenever we bundle things together, the festivals and the HVAC and,
3 million worth,
The security.
because that's what we're talking, 3 million there.
Well, I can't say there's $3 million for the savings, but I think too, it was brought up that maybe we need to look at, a flat out $3.5 million technology. But I think like Sean said, you're gonna have a lot more people competing for a $500,000 or $750,000 project than you are for a $50,000 project. So bundling those together, there's gonna be a lot more interest generated, and then you'll realize some cost savings because of mobilizations and that kind of stuff. If they can get them in Guthrie, then, you pretty well have everybody central. And then just as far as, padding of the estimate, we don't know what's gonna happen in 5 years. But, you have to put in that variable of, okay, what's the worst case scenario? I don't think it will be as bad as maybe it has been estimated. I think we will see cost savings, as far as, once you get a firm design and can put some numbers to it, I don't think there'll be $150,000 for a vestibule. Could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Here's what I'm thinking. What do you guys want to say on the technology? What's the number you want? You gotta look D in the eye when you tell them.
I know, I was gonna say, do you come up here and stand so we not know?
Because I've got my spreadsheet out and I can type the number in.
What, was it $1 million on the last one?
500,000.
500,000.
No, we need to let know these,
No, just
these stuff.
put it in context. What's it look like to drop that to 2 million?
Based on some of the numbers that you rattled off earlier, teacher computers at 300,000, smart boards are something at 750,000.
Update classrooms.
Infrastructure, 500,000.
The one-to-one, I mean, if half your student population is one-to-one, that's $1 million. You knock off of that. I think, to me, that seems very workable. But
Well, it's 150,000 more than he's ever gotten.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, all the other things that we discussed, staffing and infrastructure and things like
1.5
that,
million, I'm sorry.
I mean, that aren't in this cost. I mean, that's another major discussion to hire 4 people just to the IT staff.
Well,
and
and
You
to-
will see it phased in.
That's what I
year
say,
after
so
year.
it's almost like you're gonna have to be a,
Yeah.
Part of this is a no-brainer, because if you don't come in here and update these computers that we have and the smart boards, everything that you've already allocated in the past is for nothing.
Right,
So that's given.
that's true.
Well, I think something we need to think about is we're trying to get this to where we do have the new technology in the classrooms and we can replace it every few years. So if we're on a 5-year cycle, we can make it work.
But $1.5 million would get your teachers, their computers, the smart panels. It kind of gets the backbone of your IT structure in place to support a one-to-one down the road, or even a partial implementation. So $1.5 million would achieve that, and then if we want to add some more for the one-to-one, maybe not 100% implementation.
Well,
but-
and you can just not call it one-to-one, and you can call it classroom devices. Maybe that helps a little bit. Because I think every teacher in the system would tell you they would love to have more. You know, we've put as many in, and fortunately with the last bond issue, we were able to put out, 600 Chromebooks this last summer and 300, almost 400 iPads. So they did get some new technology, but there's nothing on their desks, those kind of things. So, and we need to think forward about replacing those things periodically instead of running them in the ground.
I'm gonna sound a little old school here, but I've been around a lot of little kids that are 3 or 4, and this is all they do. And they don't physically know how to go and do things because they're constantly doing this.
That's where I'm a huge skeptic on how valuable this technology is in the classroom at the younger ages. I know, high school level, they're doing a lot of things, web-based apps and computing and things, but
Yeah, but you see.
most kids have access to these smart devices at home, so I guess
Well,
They may not, we may not need it one-to-one, but we need to make sure they have enough that when they hit the 3rd grade and they're having to test on a computer and
Right.
stuff.
I agree.
they're-
We need to
there's
start
gotta be
teaching
enough in there, these
keyboarding.
kids
That's
got
right.
tools at the 3rd grade
Exactly.
level for sure to be able to.
Here's something I would offer as a geek and a parent of those kids. How they are learning to use them at home is different than how they should be learning to use them in the classroom. And I think that's an important part of this. And digital citizenship and teaching that appropriately comes with helping them to understand that this machine we have here is not just to text and watch YouTube of your favorite person that you're subscribed to. It is also to learn, and there are a lot of learning apps that are very effective. And our kids are using them, but getting them to understand that this is also an educational tool, not just how it's used when your parents need a break from you.
Yeah.
I think that's an important part of that.
And getting them comfortable with it.
Not
at
that
an
that ever
early
happens in
age.
our house, but occasionally we
But,
do
yeah.
need a break.
But yeah.
But I think that's an important part of this, that, and I heard the same things when we had the discussion about going one-to-one in Ponca City. And this is what the people told us that were in a one-to-one environment and had been for years. There's a lot of districts that have been doing this for years. Norman is a complete one-to-one district,
It's just a sign of the time.
but not necessarily a laptop, and not all of them taken home. So,
Okay, I'm gonna sound like Nancy negative, but when teachers use this technology in the classroom, I'm kind of scared to say this, but is it to allow the computer to teach them rather than them? Do they use it as an excuse?
I don't think so.
no, I don't think so.
It's just, instead of opening up a textbook.
I'll give you an example. I just had one teacher use her $150 classroom money, and she happens to teach speech. And so she bought apps that she could use with the students to help them learn the WH. And so she can use that iPad, put the app on there, they can hear it, they can see it, they can manipulate it and touch it. So you're getting all their senses rather than giving them a piece of paper and telling them, okay, where's the WH and what does that make?
Yeah.
And the other fact is, what you pointed out, those kids are used to doing it on a device. If you go in and throw a piece of paper in front of them, they just shut out, they're done.
Okay, so getting back to technology.
If you pare that down to 1.5 million, you can reduce the overall estimation down to what, 19,000?
19.8.
19.8. We have a possibility to magically make $500,000 appear through some additional savings, and if we can bundle some services, we might be able to meet the target estimate.
And we looked in the eyes.
And there's no, I'm not hearing anything about including the additional things that were brought up tonight that are not on this list, such as band instruments or track.
Didn't you say something about putting some language in, or can we, or do you think that's too?
I don't think we'll have the money to.
Okay,
But I would-
and Janae said it's kind of,
Those are projects we need to address. I'm hoping maybe we can do that with the building fund money. What's your thoughts? I mean, is that, how difficult is that going to be?
If we can, this is why I want to front load on, with some of our savings, the HVAC at Fogarty. That takes away some of the unexpected expenses that we face, that we have to rely on the building fund for. That would,
I certainly think the track needs to be addressed within the next few years, but. So if you tell me we can't do it with building fund money, then maybe it needs to be addressed here, but.
you know, the tough thing about this is the estimate that I got to fix it is 5 years old, and the gentleman that gave me that estimate is no longer with us. And so I don't know.
It's an unknown.
It is a definite unknown that we could get a price for, but I think considering possibly some of the some additional technology money with some of our savings could be something to address quickly some of the most pressing needs that we have with technology. Because remember that this 1.5 million would be over several years in the future, and we know we have some of those needs immediately, and it wouldn't cause any problems based on the ballot language.
Well, do we need to extend it out to 2025? So that we know we have bases covered.
Or just leave it for the next one to address in 5 years.
Yeah, I'm not in favor, and I know it's just a year, but, you know, it's a year, it's just 2 years, it's just 5 years. Yeah, I think.
Well, we don't get it any sooner.
this is
Yeah, I mean,
a
it's-
5-year plan.
No, but we know we'd be getting it.
Right. But it depends what we're doing. Yeah.
Here's my advice when considering all this. We all know the political climate in the community, and let's make sure that the items that we have on this list are items that everyone in this room can answer those questions to community members about. And then and we know that these are all very strong needs. I think we could keep the technology at 1.5, but we take some HVAC stuff and front load that with the current bond fund that are in here that are of need. Then that frees up some of this money to bring us within budget. We'll know more by the January board meeting on where we are with the numbers on the high school bid. And hopefully we can have our cake and eat it too.
Anything left over from the current bond cannot go towards band instruments or the track or anything like that, because it wasn't worded. Was not worded. Okay.
Those items.
So we would need some type of athletic or musical something written in, so that if we did have anything left over, if this got passed, I mean, we could cover it. Is that what?
I don't think you can write it in where if you have money left over,
Yeah.
you could do it for
No,
this
you would,
project.
no, you would just put it in.
You just put it in.
But then you'd have to do something. It couldn't
Ready
be,
to do it.
yeah, if you put it in there, you've got to do it. And that's why,
It's just a degree of how much you have to do for
Yeah.
the project.
but that's why I've been so cautious about saying we've got this much money left because of savings, because we don't know where we are with, we know we've got to do the HVAC at the high school. And I don't think anyone in here wants to scale that back to a point that it would not be effective to meet a budget figure. So we want to make sure that we do that because we said we were going to. Same thing with the projects going forward.
When a kid is involved in any type of activity, they tend to make sure they're eligible to do whatever activity they're in. I'm a firm believer in that. The busier the kid is, probably the better the student is. And I know I'm partial to athletics, but every one of those athletes use that track. From softball to the basketball team, that they use it. Football team, everybody uses it. I'm very strong believer in wherever we have to write it or whatever we have to do, or wherever we have to pinch our money, we need to get that fixed.
Well, and are you talking a new track or fixing the
No,
current?
I'd love a new track, but I don't know what fixing it means.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we have not had the discussion about. I can have somebody give us an estimate on that.
Yeah, I do think that the track may become an issue. Our program's growing, it's had some successes, and I think there'll be some real critical questions as to why that's not addressed.
Okay.
Whether it's from the building fund or bond proceeds, I think you're correct that we at least need to have a plan there to do something with it.
We don't want anybody getting hurt and have a liability either, so if it's that bad, I mean, I haven't seen it, I can't say, but.
I mean, it's a real eyesore for the district.
It was bad. It was 2014.
You really want to be embarrassed, go to the high school and sit in one of the basketball chairs at the games.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I don't know why we don't have them taped off, because there's somebody up broke that aren't going to fix the floor.
That's true.
I think that's my only hesitation with making any kind of last minute adjustments to what we've been working on. I mean, because God knows that our list of needs is unending. But we presented the task to the Long Range Planning Committee to come up with the priorities that they saw, and they presented it to us. And I kind of feel like we need to follow their direction because they're the people in the community, and we task them with this. So I hate to falter from that too much. I mean, because, like I said, the
Well,
needs are
I don't think
infinite.
we are. I think everything that's on
Absolute.
there.
And no, I get
Yeah.
it, but I'm just saying to try to
Add to.
add to,
Yeah.
not do,
Put something else in.
not do as much, so we can do something different. That's my only hesitation with really making too many real changes with it, but.
So do you have a hesitation about putting the language in? I mean, as far as, like he said, he could put some language, I mean, what kind of language would you use? I know last time, didn't we say, but not limited to or something?
Yeah, we did put that in there.
We put that,
To include the following but not limited to.
Right.
And as you addressed it by facility.
kind of a
then you-
catch-all.
And then you had the ability to address. You had so many projects that could be done at any school.
Yeah,
You weren't even going to come close unless your NAV doubled in 3 or 4
Right.
years. That you could say, yeah, trust me, we can dump X number of dollars in this
Yeah.
school way above our 70% language that was part of the proposition. So, and you can almost use, that same language other than you just would expand it to the areas of if it's athletics or so forth. So,
and that be
and remember-
too dangerous.
remember the discussion that we had the last time of making sure that the language we put in there was language that didn't look like we were going to do something that we hadn't said we were
Right.
going to do. Because
Yeah.
when you're on the front lines
Right.
for the bond issue and people are shooting holes in it, if it appears that if it's unclear as to what they're going to get, that's when the trust becomes questionable.
I think it's the most important point because you identified 100% in your 70% language.
Yeah.
And you said, we will accomplish these projects, guaranteed. And even though you could, like a lot of districts will do and has done in the past, at a 16.2, you could have only identified whatever 11 or 12 million, whatever that number is, 70%. And to say, yeah, we'll get these projects done. And that was what we looked at every angle as to, would someone view this as, yeah, we really have projects lined up exactly what you have done looking back 3 years. But you had we didn't know. And I'm a numbers guy, so I'm not gonna get very too far away, but I'm not so sure you can guarantee what the thought process of every voter, no matter what you see on TV as far as exit polls, you don't know what every voter thought when they passed at 76%. They may have thought these projects are going to get done, and they're saying, they're putting it out here in black and white. I don't know. And so I would just suggest work with other school districts, continue with what worked last time is a good start. So.
Okay, a question on the Cotterell, the soft costs included. Jennifer brought that, is that going to include construction manager so we don't get back in there in the end and say, oh, we didn't allow for that, so now we can't do it because we, okay, okay. Yes, I really, that has to be addressed when we build another school.
Well, I definitely think we should pursue to find out what kind of money we're looking at to fix the track. I mean, obviously the band, we know what that looks like. They provided us with that information, and I mean, definitely pursue some options to see how we can address some additional needs.
I mean, I'm okay with, sticking with the year 24, and then maybe get an estimate on the track, see what that looks like, and then if you get a number of money, room to play in the bond issue with that, or I'm okay with just waiting and deferring that and trying to accomplish it with the building fund.
Yeah.
Well, let's see how big a ticket item it is, and before we say it's a building fund item or if it's a, and Ron, to your point, I hate looking up at those chairs in that gym, and I've really considered using building fund money to replace them. That's what we did with the bleachers, but the bleachers were, they were at a point of falling on students.
How much did the bleachers cost?
They were about 60,000, and that's about what the last estimate I had on the chair backs would be. But right now, we're going to take, and the property committee's aware of this, we're going to. It's a safety item, but we've got about a $60,000 expenditure out of the building fund that's going to be for intercom system at guests because it's obsolete and it's a student safety item there. And so until we can push back our student safety item and diminish our capacity a little bit more. And we've kicked around potentially fundraising drive to defray some of that cost, and Mr. Chaplin and I have talked about that, but that really hasn't gotten off the ground much.
Buy your own chair.
Buy your own chair.
Buy your own chair. Seen it happen a lot.
So,
200,
so are
buy your
we
own chair.
circling
Yeah.
back here? We're going to stay at 2024, 18.9 million. Right now, we're at 19.8 million with 1.5 in technology. Is that what I'm hearing? And try and carve out some items from that and get a cost on repair of the track. See what we can do there and see if we can pare some of this out of there to do out of building fund also. Or out of bond fund, 2015 bond fund.
And as far as the language, kind of leave it the way it was. Nope.
When's your next meeting?
January.
January 14th. We need
When
a
you
special
got-
after that, probably. Can you probably, can you get it by then?
I was actually thinking of a special meeting before that, but when do you guys come back from break?
7th.
Yeah.
No.
I would prefer you have a 15th meeting and then you have one 10-day special meeting 10 days later.
Okay.
One just to kind of take a look and look at the language, and then we come back for the final.
Well, we'll have, we'll know what the dollar figures are on that HVAC for the high school too. Because we'll accept that bid at the January board meeting.